All right, this morning we'll continue our series on 2 Samuel. We'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 3 this morning and primarily looking at a character named Abner. Now, before we dive into that, because Abner, you've never heard of him really. You probably don't know anybody that's named after Abner in the Bible. It's a pretty obscure name, the one that most people wouldn't know even is in the Bible, right? He's not one of the big characters in the Bible, one of the main characters. And that made me think about this phenomenon that people are talking about now that's called main character syndrome. And it's essentially like just a term used to describe this phenomenon of people who are just constantly thinking of themselves as the main character in any situation. That it's no, this is about me. When I'm at the grocery store, I'm the main character at the grocery. I'm not just one of all these people at the grocery store. I'm the main person that's being thought of here, and it's partly due to social media and all those kind of things that make people feel that way. But that's actually something there's a church version of that. There's a Christian version of that. And it's like this. It happens when we read the Bible. When we read the Bible, we typically identify with the main characters, right? You're reading the Bible and you're like, oh yeah, I'm just like Abraham in this passage. I'm just like Abraham. I'm just like Moses. I am totally Moses in this passage. Or man, I'm just, you know what? Jesus went through that, so did I. Right? Whoever it is, we tend to identify with the main characters. Right? We're reading Paul's letters, and he's dealing with all these issues from all the churches. You go, yeah, I'm like Paul. I'm with Paul, and I want to say this stuff. Same thing. Me too, Paul. You know what? I would have written. If I had lived in the day, I think I probably would have written Ephesians. That's typically how we approach the Bible, is to kind of identify ourselves with the main characters. I see it all the time. When in reality, if we want to look at it even analogously of going okay, well, who would I have been? If you took me from today and put me into that story, where would I be? Who would I be in that scenario? Most of the time, just by odds, you would just be one of the people in a big crowd, right? You would be one of the nation of Israel. You'd be one of the people that, while Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 Commandments, you'd be one of the ones going I guess you can have my ring. You want to make what? A cow? Okay. Yeah, I'm on board. I don't really get it, but I'm on board. And you're just kind of complicit. You're just part of it. Right? That's most of us. That's who we would be. And we like to think, no, I would have seen through it. I would have known better. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the Gospels, you read most of the Gospels, most of you are good Christians, been good Christians for most of your lives, been close to God and been Bible studies and reading the Word and all that stuff. Who you'd have been back in the day? Pharisees. Just saying, the guys that knew Scripture the best, they didn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. So most of the time when we read that, we should read as a cautionary tale of going okay, how can I make sure that I'm not a Pharisee? Because that's what we're closest to, right? And maybe at best you're one of the disciples, but you're one of the confused disciples. You're not, you don't understand what's going on. At best you're Peter, who's just messing up all the time. You know what I mean? And that's best case scenario. So we'd be wise to learn from these tertiary characters, to learn from these characters who are in the background or on the sidelines and all that kind of thing. And today we have a story about some of those guys, two of these main guys, Abner and Joab. Okay, and Abner, he's Saul's uncle. He's King Saul's uncle, and when Saul came into power, he took Abner and he put him as the commander of his army. He's the commander of Saul's army for Saul's entire career. He and Saul are talking about Goliath, right? He is asking Abner, do you know who this kid is? This David kid who wants to come and fight Goliath? Do you know him? And he's like, no, I don't have any idea. He's there, okay, and he's put in charge of his army. So I think we can get a good picture of what Abner was like. Abner is he's a bad dude, right? He's a tough guy. Like when Saul looked at his family and thought, like, who should be commanding the army? He was like, Abner should be commanding the army. Okay, so you can imagine him like today, he's your uncle that rides a motorcycle. Okay, wears a lot of leather, probably got some kind of facial hair. He's a tough guy. That's who Abner is. And now, at this point, he's seen Saul and all of his, 3 of his sons be killed in battle. And now he's got this last son that is heir to the throne that he's put on the throne. That's who Abner is. So Abner is the experienced guy. He's been around for all of Saul's kingdom. And he's taken now this son and put him in place. And so Abner is the one kind of running things behind the show. Like behind the scenes. He's the one that's he knows all the logistics that need to happen. He knows all the people that need to be paid and all the tasks that need to be done. And Ishbosheth, the king, he's kind of just like, he's the figurehead, and he wants to do a good job, but he just doesn't know everything that Abner knows. Abner knows all the ins and outs. He's wheeling and dealing. He knows everybody. Everybody in Israel knows who he is. He's the guy. And then we have Joab. Now, Joab is like on the other end. He's actually David's nephew. He's the son of Zeruiah, David's sister, and he is been placed as the commander of David's army. So like Saul went above and got an uncle. David went the next generation below and got his nephew. So he's a young gun, right? He's the young guy. He's ambitious. He's probably a very fierce warrior for David, the greatest warrior of all time, to pick him and be the commander of his army. But that's who Joab is. Now we have these 2 guys. This are really the main characters of our story today. All right, so we'll look at 2 Samuel chapter 3, 1 through 25. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, of Ahinoam of Jezreel, and his second Chileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith. And the fifth Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth Ithream of Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David at Hebron. While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, and the daughter of Ahiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, Why have you gone into my father's concubine? Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and to his friends. I have not given you into the hand of David, and yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. God do so to Abner and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what Yahweh has shown to him, has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom of the house of Saul, to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring over all Israel to you. And he said, Good, I will make a covenant with you. But one thing I require of you, that is, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, Give me my wife, Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband Paltiel, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her, weeping after her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, Go, return. And he returned. And Abner conferred with the elders of Israel, saying, For some time past you have been seeking David as king over you. Now then, I will bring it about, for Yahweh has promised David, saying, By the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. Abner also spoke to Benjamin, and then Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin thought good to do. When Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go and will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that I may make a covenant with you, and you may reign over all your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the army that was with him came, it was told Joab, Abner, the son of Ner, came to the king, and he has let him go, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab went to the king and said, What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it you have sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner, the son of Ner, came to deceive you and to throw your going out, and to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you are doing. All right, let's break it down a little bit. So, there's a lot going on there. So there's civil war. There's civil war going on between Israel and Judah. That battle we looked at last week, the Battle of Gibeon, that wasn't the end of the war, that was the beginning. And this war is waging, and it's going on for a long time, where there's this conflict between the house of David and the house of Israel. Sorry, the house of David and the house of Saul. It's kind of how they're showing it. And David's got Judah with him, the tribe of Judah. The house of Saul has all the other tribes. And it says basically David's army is just like slowly wearing them down. Through multiple battles, different locations, all that kind of thing is slowly wearing them down, getting stronger and stronger while the house of Saul got weaker and weaker. And David, during this time, he's having children. It says 6 sons that are born to him when he's in Hebron during this period that he's living there. And this information, where it just kind of gives us the names of the sons and their mothers, serves several functions. First, just a record of facts that we'll be able to come back to later. These guys are going to come up again, and we should recognize that they are David's sons, and it's just letting us know, hey, factually, here's when his sons were born. It's also evidence of just growth happening in David's life, the fact that he is flourishing, that he is growing stronger, his army is getting bigger, and they're winning victories, and they're slowly eating away at the armies of the house of Saul. And he's having children. He's doing well. But it's also evidence of David's failure to follow Mosaic law. Here's where that is. Because David's not perfect, right? David is one of the better guys. When we look at the Old Testament, he's one of the better guys. But this is a place where he is violating Mosaic law. And we see this in the way that they name his wives. Right, so he tells us Ahinoam of Jezreel. That's when we don't learn about how he meets her. He just marries her. Abigail, the widow of Nabal. We get the whole story on that one, where Nabal's trying to rip him off, and Abigail saves him, and God ends up killing Nabal. That's a kind of a cool love story for them. But then we get Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. That we get this whole title for her. And the reason for that is that this marriage represents a treaty between David and the king of Geshur. That's why he would marry this daughter of this other king, is to create a treaty between them. And it's a very strategic political treaty, because Geshur is located to the north of, just north of the Sea of Galilee, northeast. And so it effectively sandwiches David and the tribe of Judah, and Geshur up here kind of sandwich Israel there in the middle, the remaining tribes that King Ishbosheth is over. And so it's a strategic treaty there to put pressure on Ishbosheth. And these marriage alliances are specifically forbidden in the law of Moses. So if we look at Deuteronomy 17, which talks about laws for kings, Deuteronomy 17, verses 16 through 17, tells us that the king must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. Since Yahweh has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. God told kings they should not acquire these 3 things, because they were a means of building up their security for themselves. Both horses is essentially military, right? That's, for them, that would be like stockpiling weapons. because horses give you military strength. Wives give you military treaties, and gold, we all know what gold does. It just makes it so you can buy things and pay people off, and there's also lots of good reasons to have a lot of money around. You can do what you want. And so God tells them, don't acquire a lot of any of these things because you need to be relying on me. But David here violates that. He marries this the daughter of this king to create that military treaty. And then he marries 3 others that we don't even get to know anything about. So meanwhile, that's what's happening with David. Meanwhile, what's happening with Abner is that Abner is making himself strong in the house of Saul. And again, I don't think it's very difficult for him. He's in a unique position. He had served as Saul's right-hand man for his entire reign. He had known Ishbosheth since he was born. Right? He knew him when he was a little kid. He's an old man now, and Ishbosheth's a young man. And so he had many connections in Israel, and he had, of course, just the wisdom that comes with age. He knows how things work. He knows the people. He knows the terrain. He knows how to navigate both geographically and socially in Israel. He knows who to talk to for all kinds of different things. And so he's probably slightly frustrated by having to work through Ishbosheth. Right? Ishbosheth is essentially his puppet. And having to convince this kid, no, here's what you need to do. Come on, Ishbosheth, just listen to me. Do what I say. It's going to work out. And you can imagine that they had some difficult conversations, that there was pushback on following his advice or not. And so he probably even did a lot of things without ever even talking to Ishbosheth. He probably realized, I can just make this happen myself. Let me go get that done. And he never needs to know. And so that's why he's getting stronger. You can imagine even people coming to see the king, they needed help with something, and even walking into the throne room or whatever, and Abner's sitting there to the right, and Ishbosheth's on the throne, and then just addressing Abner. And that getting to Ishbosheth, realizing well, they're just going to talk to him, right? And hey, we're having some trouble with the Amalekites. They're raiding us, and can you send some help? And Abner's the guy to go to because he knows how to do this stuff, and he's the one that can get it done. So all this resulted in his position rising, his profile rising. I imagine it, even him just effectively functioning as a default king, de facto king. So then enters Rizpah. She doesn't really have anything to do with this, but she is a character that is here. She was Saul's concubine. All right, so she's someone that Saul would sleep with. And someone had told Ishbosheth that Abner had slept with Rizpah. And we don't get any evidence to support this accusation. If it were true, it would have been a sign of disrespect and essentially treason. That was seen as a sign of treason because oftentimes concubines would be utilized to create an heir. And so if someone went in and slept with a concubine, they could essentially create an heir with someone who would be seen as an heir to the throne, but who would have their DNA. So it was very forbidden. And Abner is accused by Ishbosheth of going into her, right? Of going in and sleeping with her. And he is offended by the accusation. The way he responds makes me think that he didn't do it. Because we don't get any evidence that he did. But he had remained loyal to the house of Saul and served Ishbosheth out of respect he had for Saul. He viewed himself as a servant of Saul, and so then him helping Ishbosheth establish his reign and working through him, he had remained loyal to the house of Saul. And so he apparently views the accusation as unforgivable because he immediately decides to defect. Right? He says, no, I'll go and accomplish for David what Yahweh has sworn to me. So Abner was aware of God's promise to David. He knew that this was the case. And so to me, it seems that Abner was probably torn. Right? When Saul dies, he knows what God has promised David. He's heard this rumor, right? Probably through Jonathan. But he'd heard about it, and so he knows that God has told David he'd be the next king. And he probably had a high degree of respect for David because he was the commander of the army and David was the best warrior. he would have known David very well, relied on him, respected him as a soldier. And he clearly believes in Yahweh. And so he knows what Yahweh had promised David. And so when Saul has died and three of his sons, I think he was torn in that moment of like, do I go and support David and try to prop him up and bring him into the throne? Or do I stay with Ishbosheth? And I think in his mind, his loyalty to Saul, that he had sworn allegiance to Saul as king, that carried then to his son. And I think he felt obligated to put Ishbosheth on the throne and to work through him. I think that's just what won out in his mind. But at this moment then, when Ishbosheth betrays him and accuses him of something so horrible, he just can't believe it. I think he can't believe it because he's like, I've been helping you so much. You know, I could have put anybody on this throne. And I stuck by you, and yet you accuse me of this. And so he says, I swear that I am going to accomplish for David what God has sworn to him. I'm going to do for David what God has sworn to him. I'm going to make it happen. And it seems that he has the power to do so. Ishbosheth is terrified in that moment. Right? He can't even respond because he's so afraid of Abner. Again, another reason that makes me think Abner was a bad dude in the sense of like being tough and a warrior and all that kind of thing, that he was just not somebody you could speak back to in that situation. And so Abner sends word to David that he would like to form an alliance with him, and David agrees on the condition that Abner would return Michal, his first wife, to him. Michal had been Saul's daughter, and it was the first woman that David married. And it seems married at least to some extent for love, because he had been offered another of Saul's daughters to marry before, and he turned it down. But he seems to actually have loved Michal, and when Saul finally decided he was done with David, he took his wife and gave her to another man. And so David says, I would like her back. If you're going to come, Abner, I want you to prove to me by taking her away. It would be a sign of betrayal of Saul's house for him to take his daughter and give her to David, the man that Saul was trying to kill. So why did he demand her return? I think he loved her. I think he also had paid a high price. He even mentions the 100 foreskins that he had brought as a result. I mean, this was a big undertaking for him to like go and pay the bridal price for Michal, and show that Abner had transferred his allegiance to David. Michal's second husband was not happy about this, and it says he followed her. I mean, it sounds just so pathetic that he's just weeping, following her as she seems very ready to leave. She just seems like it's no problem for her to just go back to David. She's like, oh, great, go back to David. And she's been gone for years, but she seems very happy to go back to David. Meanwhile, this guy's just like, oh, don't leave me, following her. It just sounds pathetic. And again, to show just what a hard guy Abner is, this guy's weeping, following her, and when he gets to where Abner is, Abner goes, dude, get out of here. Go back, and he just turns tail. He just goes back. You don't mess with Abner. And so then immediately Abner begins to negotiate with the elders of Israel about making David king over Israel as well as Judah. They all agree they would prefer David to be their king. And so we just see Abner being so persuasive and powerful, right? He can just wheel and deal. He can convince them that, like, hey, wouldn't you rather have David? Like, we've had this Ishbosheth, like, we don't need him anymore. Let's get David in here. He's very persuasive and powerful. But did David really need Abner's help? The question that I have here, right? That God had said he would take the kingdom from the house of Saul and give it to David. Did God need Abner to accomplish this? Did he need Abner's help? Right? Abner, think about what Abner said. Like, I think it just kind of rolls by for us, but if we think about it, he said, I will accomplish for David what God has promised him. I will accomplish for David what God has promised him. Did God need his help? Did he need to do that? In any situation, does God need your help? Does God need our help? And the answer, of course, is no. He doesn't need your help. But God often wants to use us, right? There's a famous illustration of a man. There's a hurricane warning. And this man is living in his house, and he's an old Christian, and he's got his Bible and everything, and some people come by to say, like, hey, there's this hurricane warning, we need to get out of here, and he goes, no, I trust God will protect me. God will protect me. And so then the storm starts coming, and the water starts rising, and so some firemen come by, they're clearing the area, and they say, hey, come with us, like, let's get out of here. The storm is no joke. Like, we got to evacuate. And he goes, no, God will protect me. And pretty soon the water's, up through the first floor. And he's on the second floor of his house and thinking about how to get to the roof. And a boat comes by. And they say, come on. I can't believe you're still here, but like, we got to get out of here. Look, this water's still rising. Like, we can't stay here. And he goes, no, God will protect me. God will protect me. And next thing you know, he's on his roof because the water just continues to rise. And a helicopter comes, and they lower a ladder down, and I'm like, hey, come on, let's get you out of here, let's get you saved. He goes, no, God will protect me. I trust God to protect me. And next thing you know, the water's rising even over his roof level, and he swims for a while, but then he drowns. And he goes to heaven. He's a Christian. He goes to heaven. And he goes, God, what happened? Like, I thought you would protect me. And he goes, I sent a fire truck and a boat and a helicopter. What more do you want from me? Right? And that's oftentimes how we feel, right? And we kind of think like, well, yeah, like I wanted something, a miracle, but God just sent something ordinary. But on the other side, like that's often... often, again, we hear that joke story, and we think of ourselves like the man of going, no, God will protect me. But in this situation, like, someone has to drive the boat. Someone has to fly the helicopter. Someone has to drive the truck. Someone has to go door to door knocking to help these people. And those were the people that God said he sent. And so does God need our help? No, but he wants to use us. And so God did use Abner to help accomplish the transfer of the kingdom to David. Like, him answering that call of like, you know what, I'm going to go and do accomplish what God has promised to David is not Abner's pride. It's Abner responding to the call of God to use him for his good and glory. But then we get Joab coming in. And when Abner comes to Hebron, David, there was a feast for him. There's this reunion. And I think it's a joyous evening for them. And Abner's probably telling him, like, we're going to do great things. You're going to be such a better king than Ishbosheth. Like, I can't believe what I had to deal with that guy. And then next thing, and then he leaves to go continue his conferences and continue talking to people. And Joab returns from this raid having just missed Abner. And he immediately assumes that Abner came as a spy. And I think his suspicion is logical, but it's also fueled by his hatred of Abner. If you remember last week, Abner had killed his brother Asael. So we'll look next here at verses 26 through 30. When Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. But David did not know about it. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the stomach so that he died, for the blood of Asael his brother. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before Yahweh for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai his brother killed Abner because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle at Gibeon. So Joab he gets back from this raid, and then he learns that Abner is here, but he's gone, and he knows which way he went. He takes some of his fastest riders, has them chase him down and have him come back. And so Abner comes back. And why did Abner come back? Well, he had been negotiating his defection to David. He would have known that he needed to repair his relationship with Joab after killing Asahel. And I think he'd been anticipating this conversation. He probably had hoped to already have it when he went to this feast with David, that he was hoping Joab would be there. They could talk about it. They could break it all down, and he could explain himself. And I didn't want to kill him. He wouldn't stop chasing me, and I had to. And it was an accident to begin with. I think he wanted to have this conversation. But then Joab murders Abner out of revenge for his brother's death. And it also is to remove a rival for the position of commander of David's army. Abner, no doubt, would have taken over as commander of David's army if he defected. And Joab doesn't want to lose that position. He kills him. Revenge for his brother. And this is murder, right? This is murder. Even though it's in revenge for his brother, he did murder him. I mean, he assaults him in the gate of the city. And that's an important factor. Why does it mention that he did it within the city gate, in the midst of the gate? Because Hebron was a city of refuge. So in Joshua chapter 20, I won't read all of it, but it talks about establishing these cities of refuge, and that a manslayer who strikes any person without intent or unknowingly may flee there. They shall be for you a refuge from the avenger of blood. And so that would apply in this situation. Abner did not intend to kill Asahel, and he was in a city of refuge. This makes it extra wrong that Joab committed this murder here. And so David immediately distances himself from Joab's actions. Right? He says it, and it would have been many people's assumption that he had ordered this murder. So he makes it abundantly clear, I'm guiltless before Yahweh. I had nothing to do with this. He even curses Joab and Abishai, who seems to have been in on it as well. And he appeals to Yahweh that Joab's family should never be without someone who has a discharge, meaning like a illness in that way, one who has leprosy, one who holds a spindle, which either means like walks with a cane, or it can possibly be a euphemism for like holding a spindle can be a euphemism for doing women's work. So essentially a man who is effeminate would be another possibility of what he's saying there. One who falls on his sword, meaning one who commits suicide, or one who goes hungry. This is one of the most brutal and vulgar curses that we find in Scripture. And it isn't pronounced in the name of Yahweh. And so it seems to be just David's personal wishes for Joab. And David maintained this resentment to his deathbed. Even though, as we see, he allowed Joab to continue to be the commander of his army. And he continued to have a close relationship with Joab. We'll see him interact with Joab throughout the rest of his life. But on his deathbed, he tells his son Solomon what to do with him. In 1 Kings chapter 2, we find this, where he says, Moreover, you know what Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, how he dealt with two of the commanders of the armies of Israel, Abner, the son of Ner, and Amasa, the son of Jether, whom he killed, avenging in the time of peace for blood that had been shed in war, and putting the blood of war on the belt around his waist and on the sandals of his feet. Act therefore, knowing your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to Sheol in peace. So I think there's an obvious question. Like, if this is how he felt, if he wants to pronounce this curse on him, and then even burden his son with dealing with Joab after David has died, why didn't David just deal with Joab in the direct aftermath of this incident? If what Joab did was so evil that he deserves to have his family cursed of always having someone with some kind of a problem in his line, or to be murdered as to be killed, executed himself as he instructs Solomon to do there, why didn't he deal with it immediately? Perhaps it's possible that Joab was too valuable to him as a military commander. It's possible that he was afraid of angering his sister Zeruiah by killing her son. We can't know for sure, but it does seem that he was wrong not to deal with this situation directly. We should be keeping short accounts of these things and dealing with it one way or another, either if he's the king executing the justice that needs to be executed, or offering forgiveness if this is a personal offense. In Ephesians chapter 4, it talks about this, where Paul says, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil." Again, David held this resentment for his entire life. He let many suns go down on his anger. He held on to this his entire life, to where this is one of the last things he speaks of on his deathbed, is about making sure that Joab doesn't die in peace. David would have done well to take his own advice, as he writes in Psalm 37, "Be still before Yahweh and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for Yahweh shall inherit the land." We'll look lastly here at verses 31 through 39. David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." And King David followed the bier. They buried Abner at Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner. And all the people wept, and the king lamented for Abner, saying, "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen." And all the people wept again over him. And then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, "God do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else until the sun goes down." And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put Abner to death, the son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. Yahweh repay the evildoer according to his wickedness." So David commands the people to tear their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And the people do it. He wants everyone to know for sure he did not authorize this murder, and it works. People are convinced. And he emphatically honors Abner at his funeral. He points out how Abner's death had affected him, and he appeals to Yahweh to repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. He's asking God to repay Joab for what he's done. But isn't David in authority to punish Joab? That's the funny thing. For him to say, "God, repay Joab for what he's done," when he's the king. It's like the king saying, "Gosh, I wish someone would do something about this. Justice isn't being done." Well, he's the one that can do justice, but he's not doing it. And in general, throughout this passage, I keep asking myself, is David being genuine or is he being political? And I tend to think he's putting on a bit of a political show here. There's a line that makes it difficult in that it says, everything the king did pleased all the people. It seems to me that he's negotiating this death perfectly for his own uses. He's convincing the people, hey, I didn't do this to Abner. But he's also managing not to actually punish Joab, keeping everybody happy, mourning the right amount. And he even emphasizes at the end. You see at the end where he's I was gentle today, though anointed king. Can you guys believe it? I was so gentle, and yet I'm the king. Man, these sons of Zeruiah, they're more severe than me, right? Hey, but I kind of wouldn't you agree I struck a perfect balance? And they do. They agree. It's very difficult to please everybody. And if what you're doing is popular, it can be difficult to do what is right when it's unpopular. This is why Jesus warns us against practicing our righteousness before others to be seen by them. In Matthew chapter 6, he says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. Then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. They may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you that they have received their reward. And when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you." We'll wrap up with this 3 takeaways for today's message. Number 1, respond when God calls you to be used by Him, like Abner did. Number 2, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Deal with issues as they come up. And lastly, do what is right regardless of whether it is popular. I'm going to pray in a minute, and we'll take communion together, sing one closing song after that. There'll be a prayer team available over here if you'd like prayer for anything. Would you bow with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for this morning that we can just submit ourselves to you, God, and we know that that is the key to all of this, is that we submit to you. We rely on your grace and your mercy, your forgiveness, God, because we are not perfect. Pray these things in Jesus' blessed name. Amen.